The federal government has announced $27 million in funding today to assist Indigenous communities in searching for burial sites at residential schools. The money was part of the 2019 federal budget, which prompted questions about why the government hasn't acted sooner.
We hear nothing but talk in Ottawa, including from this Prime Minister who 6 years ago said he would move on all plans, Mr. Speaker. These children, the families, the communities deserve a precise and clear roadmap with funding and timelines.
Since 2019, we have been working on this issue with Indigenous communities, with Indigenous leadership to make sure we're moving forward in a culturally appropriate, trauma-informed way.
All of this is, of course, linked to the announcement by a Kamloops First Nation that preliminary results found the remains of what could be children on the grounds of a former residential school. Angela Sterritt is from the Gitxsan Nation, and she's also a reporter with CBC in Vancouver. Angela, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I'm glad to have you on the program because you can be, help bring us, I think, closer to this particular story because of a lot of the reporting you've done and your understanding of that community. And one thing is that this was not just the largest residential school in Canada, but it was a school that brought people in from across the province. And so how is this being felt by First Nations across British Columbia?
Yeah, as you said, it was the largest residential school in the Indian Affairs residential school system. So if you can imagine how many people this has impacted, knowing that children came to the school from right across the province, so Vancouver Island to the north, to the lower mainland of British Columbia. So this has been tremendous. This has been an enormous weight. This has been what I've been calling the sleeping giant of trauma, because Indigenous people have known, for decades that their family members, their loved ones didn't make it home from residential school, and that some of them have been left in unmarked graves. However, this has opened up a new understanding for many Canadians who are just coming to this from a very new place. Many people can relate to seeing their social media feeds with that number, 215 children died, not brought home, buried in unmarked graves, potentially at a residential school, at one. So there's residential school survivors right across the country feeling the ripple effects of hearing this news in this last week.
And Angela, I mean, the First Nation has been abundantly clear that these are preliminary findings, and that it is what could be the remains of up to 215 children. I know it's very preliminary, but what do we know and sort of not know about these findings? Right.
So we know that the Tk'emlúps, the Tk'emlúps people have known for many, many years through oral histories from relatives about potential children being in unmarked graves near the residential school or on the residential school grounds. So in the early 2000s, the community started to do some preliminary work, archaeological work, I'm told, in an area adjacent to the residential school. What happened last week was a ground penetrating radar specialist had a look at the area and verbally gave these preliminary results to the community with that number 215. So in the middle of June, we will hopefully hear about this report, a written report that's come out from that specialist for more accurate numbers. So that number could be higher, that number could be lower. What we do know is that there already were 53 at least children whose names are documented as having died from that residential school, from the Kamloops Indian residential school. And so Indigenous people have known, for many years that this has happened. But what has happened over the years, when the TRC report came out in 2015, I think Canadians were just grappling with the idea that residential school even existed, that hundreds of thousands of Indigenous children attended and were even tortured at residential school. And so the fact that thousands, 4,000 children or more died, and were many buried in unmarked graves at residential school, kind of got left and brushed aside. So Indigenous people are saying now is the time to talk about those who didn't make it home, and talk about how horrific that is for the family members, and to find ways to commemorate them. So once that report comes out in middle June, I'm told that there then will be most likely an archaeological dig in that area. And then the community will move to find ways to identify the children. And then the most important way that we're hearing from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is to find ways to honor and commemorate the lives of those children.
Are there ways, just to pick up on that the community, and every community, because there are, as you rightly note, there were residential schools in multiple provinces, and different communities may deal with these things, the search and what to do with remains in different ways. This particular community, is there a sense already of what they want to do?
I mean, I think for them right now, they're in conversation with the coroner. They're also in conversation with the RCMP. They're in conversation with various Roman Catholic Church bodies, with the federal government, as you know, to find ways to find justice for those children. How is the federal government going to be, and the Roman Catholic Church, going to be held accountable for the number of children that is found, that is determined? And how are they going to then name, commemorate, and honor those children's lives? I think we won't know the exact number for quite some time now, because these are, again, our very preliminary numbers, and we don't have a written report yet from the ground penetrating radar specialist. And we haven't had somebody go in and do that archaeological dig to see how many children are there. So that's something that we will hear in the days to come. But I think the most important thing right now that I'm seeing for survivors, it's really important to note, in British Columbia, many Indigenous people have now had their first or second dose of the vaccine. So that means people have been able to gather. And that's been so critical for Indigenous people, who we know this is part of our culture. This is part of the way that we heal. So feasting, drum circles, coming together, and also having the supports in place. And that's been my biggest worry as an Indigenous person and a reporter, is what kind of supports are available for the tremendous pain that is being carried right now by survivors and by intergenerational survivors and Indigenous people as a whole.
Angela Sterritt, thank you very much for speaking to us, and also for your reporting, not just on these latest revelations, but over many years looking at all of these issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel, or click the link for another video.